Hi, it's Renee. Welcome back to another episode of Reset with Renee. And today I wanted to talk about who my clients are, what going back to some high school math, the lowest common denominator, not meaning something bad or wrong, but what do all of my clients tend to have in common? And I want to say that first and set the context because many of you know I do specialize in CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you aren't familiar with what CPTSD is, it is typically someone who has had childhood trauma, abuse or neglect, and secondary adult trauma. And they could have had several secondary adult traumas. And so, it's more than a single episode of PTSD. It is usually a lifetime and decades of traumatic instances and ways of coping with that. So that's my specialty. And so the things that I help CPTSD clients with are the same things that can be helpful to people who don't have that trauma history. So this is how I would like for you to listen, because what I'm about to talk about is just human nature. And so all of my clients, regardless if they have a diagnosis of some kind or not, have challenges and growth opportunities in these areas. Okay, you ready? So the first would be a conflict in their basic needs. We all have needs. We all have fears. We all have dreams. And we all have wounds. I've talked about that in previous episodes of this podcast. But a basic human need that we have from the beginning, right out the chute, is the need for attachment. When we are young infants and we're young toddlers, we are dependent upon our caregivers to provide good care for us, meaning our physical needs, our social needs, our emotional needs. We are dependent on our caregivers, usually our parents, but not always, to meet those needs. And as you can imagine, if you're a parent or you've been parented by someone, it's it's imperfect. No one is going to perfect in a perfectly attuned, perfectly present, perfectly emotionally intelligent way 100% of the time. And so I believe most people have some wounds from their childhood and older around the caregiving they received. And I don't mean that to blame, shame, judge any caregiver or parent. It's just facts. No one is a perfect parent. And so, what that looks like translated into adulthood is when we have wounds and unmet needs around attachment, meaning who we're connected with, who we can depend on, who we trust to be there for us, when that has not been met for us, or there's been betrayal around that, oftentimes people will then struggle and be in conflict about the people in their relationship with. And so they struggle in the way that they want to be true to themselves, but they're afraid. They're afraid that if they're true to themselves, they're going to lose their connection and attachment to someone who matters to them, someone who meets at least one or more of their needs for attachment. Maybe not all, maybe it's not perfect and they know that, but they also know if they stay true to themselves, they're going to lose that person, or there's a strong likelihood that they'll lose that person. So people who are in relationships that don't meet all their needs, who feel ambivalent, who experience dissonance, which is this is what I want and what's important to me, and yet this is what I'm actually inhabiting in my relationship world. That dissonance, that disconnect doesn't feel good. And so oftentimes the basic issue is, are you being authentic and true to yourself? And from that place of authenticity, then you will attract people who you are in alignment with, and your relationships will become more effortless instead of effortful. So that's one thing that most of my clients have in common, whether it's their personal relationships or even their professional relationships. So attachment versus authenticity, that is, both are needs, and how to meet them at the same time can be a learning curve. Okay, that's one. Two would be nervous system. We all have an autonomic nervous system. It's formed, in fact, when we're in our mother's womb. So think about your mom. Think about the context in which she was pregnant with you. Did she have support or not support from your father? Did she have support around her? Was she stressed? Was there generational challenges or family secrets or financial stress or intersectionality, which refers to having multiple challenges like difference in race, gender, financial status, all the socioeconomic kind of stuff? All of that can impact a mother and then her developing fetus and baby. And so if you know that your nervous system is a little bit jacked, as we say, no shame or blame. Highly likely you had no control for that was formed a long time ago. It's been, repeated over time. So it's something to be aware of and then to draw some attention to for healing. So if you're not familiar with the nervous system, there's different levels to it. We want to go for ventral vagal, which means that we are calm, we are connected to ourselves, we're connected to others, and we're open to social connection. So it's the best case scenario. When we're shut down, feel depressed, feel fatigued, we're in dorsal vagal shutdown. And when we're anxious, then we're highly activated, have way more energy, we feel uncomfortable, we want to discharge that in some way. And so as you might imagine, you can cycle up and down what's called the polyvagal ladder. You have a vagus nerve that travels through your body and it's related to your nervous system functioning. So if you're someone who tends to go low, tends to go high, struggles to get in the window of ventral vagal, a thing that you might want to research would be vagal exercises or vagus nerve exercises. They tend to be quick little things that you can do with your physical body to help your nervous system reset. So that's a tip for you there. And then the way that our nervous system protects us, and this goes back thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years, okay, is the 4 F's of nervous system protection. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Okay, and people have generally 1 or 2 of those 4 F's that they tend to gravitate to naturally. Given my history, I was much more of a fawner, which meant, fawn and freeze. Let me be quiet, let me stay small, let me not create conflict, let me not get into conflict, let me just fly under the radar and hope I don't get in trouble. So that has been my default for a number of decades, until I got to the point where it's like, fuck this, let's go for some authenticity and embody boundaries and see what happens. That is not an easy process. So you might have different ones. Many of my clients, and I do this too, has flight, and that can literally be, I'm overwhelmed, I'm leaving this conversation, I'm leaving this house, I'm getting out of here. Or it can be cognitive flight or mental flight, meaning you go to your head to try to fix things and solve things. So folks who really spin, spiral, have kind of OCD-like tendencies, they go to flight to their head. Folks that have power and control issues will go to fight. They will try to find a way to have safety by getting things under control. So, so no shame or blame if that's what you do, but check in and notice what happens when you're out of your window of stress tolerance, when you're out of your window of capacity or ventral vagal, and how can you begin to get back into that? So learning about polyvagal theory and helping your nervous system is, I think, kind of how to human 101. So it's 2 things, the attachment and authenticity needs, your nervous system. And then the other way that many clients present would be the different parts of them. So we talk about through a lens of IFS, internal family systems, that we all have our essence, our spirit, our soul, our center, whatever you want to call it. It's like your birthright. However you came into this world, your spirit was good, you were good. And so we want to tap into that, connect to that, and amplify that as much as possible, as well as connecting to universal consciousness and other ways to support ourselves when we're on the struggle bus with our own self energy. And so that's something that I talk about, self-leadership, with all my clients, whether they're coaching, therapy, working on personal, working on professional, whatever. Self-leadership is key. When you're not in that space, when you're not centered, when you're not grounded, then you are blended oftentimes or activated by a part of you. And there's two flavors of that. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can talk about it, but I simplify it to say that we all have wounded parts of us, times in our lives where we didn't have our needs met. And in fact, we were hurt in some form or fashion. So we don't tend to like to feel hurt. And so most of us have learned how to avoid it, tap it down, depress it, minimize it, silence it, ignore it, or whatever. And we do that by engaging from our protective parts. And these are well-meaning, well-intended parts of us whose job is basically to keep us from feeling the pain and the hurt of those wounded parts. And so when I talk with anyone, whether it's someone in my personal life or a client I'm working with, I'm listening to hear, was that a self-led statement, or was that coming from a part? And is that person or client aware of the part? And are they connected to it? And how can I help facilitate or guide that? So think about that. What are some of those places you go to when you hurt? And when you're in protective part places by their energetic signature. And again, this goes with polyvagal theory. And again, this is like how to human 101. So some prompts would be, if you have I must energy, it's really like high sympathetic activity. I gotta make things happen. It's intense. It's an agenda. Pressure, overwhelm often goes with that. And with the overwhelm, then you can have another protective part frequency, which would be I can't. It's like collapse, helplessness, hopelessness. I can't. I can't. It doesn't even matter. And I won't. Nope, not going to do that. Nope, never going to do that. Nope, I won't. A lot of people have made what I call solemn vows or marching orders from the colonel. I won't do that. I won't be like my parents. I won't be like my spouse. I won't be like my boss. I won't. And then the last is a little bit crunchier and darker and more intense. And that is I will destroy. And so sometimes the clients that I'm thinking of right now, especially those with some childhood trauma or neglect, they have a part of them that wants to destroy. Sometimes it's others or events or product, like something that's important to someone else because there's a sense of injustice, or it so severely attacks themselves. You don't matter. We've fucked up. Does it even matter if I'm around? Like the world would be better off without me. So it sounds alarming. It sounds like suicidal ideation. It's like a part of them that is like, I'm going to take you out because you suck. So that is what I will destroy can really be very, very zingy and very difficult to hold when you have it inside of you. And if you have a loved one, so if you're married to someone or your child is having tendencies like that, to hear from those parts is very hard. So that's something that I work with people on. So again, attachment and authenticity, nervous system regulation, protective parts and wounded parts, and self-energy. And so all of that, kind of bringing that together, is what we're going for is like wholehearted living. That's one of my missions, one of my passions. It's like we cannot be walking around this earth as bobbleheads, even though that's what our American culture teaches us to do. Stay in our head, think it through, fix it, and forget about the rest. So when I work with clients, I want them to learn things and know what their self-talk is and to be clear about their thought processes, but to also connect to their body. Where do they feel things in their body? Are they aware of their body? Are they cut off at the neck from their body? What is their spiritual world like? How do they connect to their spirit, their essence, their gifts, their expertise? And how do they connect with spirituality, like the collective, the greater collective? Whether that's a religious tradition, which is helpful if that helps you. And then a lot of people I work with have had a lot of wounding from religious institutions. And so they have to then find their own spiritual pathway. So that can be an important part. And then your heart. Like, so many people say to me, I feel like my heart's closed. I feel like my heart's armored up. I feel like I've walled off this person in my life. And that doesn't feel good. We're not designed to be armored up and constricted. We're supposed to be more open-hearted and connected. So to me, many of the people that I work with, they're disconnected. They're not integrated. And so we want to work towards connection and integration, bringing that all together. So my approach tends to be top down, teaching things from the mind that helps the body, spirit, soul, and then also bottom up. Let's do some experiential activities that can activate feeling states, sensations in your body, and can help you reprocess things that have been stuck. And once you've done that, then we integrate with the mind. So it's a top-down, bottom-up approach. Okay, what else did I want to share with you? Okay, so I say all that to say that my CPTSD clients, CPTSD survivors, and I'm one of them, we have done a lot of work. if you or me or anyone else has embraced CPTSD recovery and healing, it's like signing up for an ultramarathon. This isn't just a regular 5K we sign up for, not to minimize a 5K, not knocking that, but it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, and it honestly takes a shitload of money, because CPTSD isn't in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, which is like the cookbook of different diagnoses and labels, and therefore it's not covered by insurance. You're likely to have a different diagnosis that will be covered by insurance. So there's a lot of folks walking around with anxiety, depression, ADHD, bipolar, other diagnoses that may or may not be that. It could be a manifestation of underprocessed trauma. That is a topic for another day, but I wanted you to know why CPTSD is a little bit different. So CPTSD survivors have really had to reclaim their seat of personal power. Oftentimes they've been victimized repeatedly across the decades by different people, places, institutions even. And so to come out of that valid victim story and to move into empowerment and personal power, to have personal power, which is I'm okay no matter what, versus circumstantial power, I'm only okay if. And so that's a big jump for most people when they've had a lot of things hurt them repeatedly. And so reclaiming their personal power, reclaiming their spirituality, and connecting to their gifts and expertise is huge. Okay. And other people, I'm going to call them the normies, the folks that don't have CPTSD or another mental health diagnosis, unless you are activated by an external event, by someone in your environment, by something in your family, at work, with your health, unless there's an activating change, okay, you're not likely to sign up for the ultramarathon of healing that CPTSD survivors do, and that's okay. But when you have a life event that invites you to dig in and to dig deep, look to people like me and others who've had to do the ultramarathon, and not by choice. But we've run the race, we've finished it, and we have the medal to prove it. So, CPTSD survivors, we really didn't have the choice, but if we want a life of peace and freedom, we've had to do the work. So if you are looking for someone to guide you with that, keep us in mind. You want to learn from the experts, right? So with that, I want to say CPTSD, it's a mouthful, are cycle breakers. And I bet that if you don't have a trauma history, you have likely encountered a tricky or toxic person, place, or thing, like I said earlier. And so if your perspective, your skill set, your capacity needs a little bump up, and it's an opportunity for expansion, I hope you'll keep me in mind to work with you or someone like me. And so I do want to say I wouldn't have asked for my trauma, any of it, not at all. And most survivors I speak to would say the same thing. It's not something we would choose. And yet, with the healing that we've done, those of us who've done it, our wisdom is unmistakable. You may not know it until you talk to us and get to know our story and to hear our journey. But it's an education and it's wisdom that no one can take from you. It's really extraordinary. And so CPTSD survivors, our healing is really a gift to those of you who are normies and to the rest of the collective. You know, when you're ready to learn and grow, you'll want to work with someone that knows themselves, that owns their story, is authentic, and can guide you on your own journey. You're going to want a person that gets the challenge, that knows the obstacles, knows when to nudge, and knows when to dial it back and allow some pacing, some resting, and some integrating. So having a guide, a coach, a therapist, whoever it is, shaman, whatever, having someone that can hold space for you and provide a path is truly priceless. The outcome, no matter what, is something you won't regret. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of money, and yet you get to keep the outcome. It's yours. No one can take it from you. And that is true justice. So if you're interested in joining me or other cycle breakers, and breaking the cycle, okay, of living, loving, and leading in survival mode, in a frequency of fear, with the strategic plan of control, you'd like to step out of that and to live, lead, and love in a more wholehearted way, I invite you to connect with me and others to lean in and to connect. So thank you for listening to this episode of Reset with Renee, and I hope you'll tune in next time I join here to share more with you. Take good care.